1986 is a big year to cover, as C64 had a lot of great games released for it, so I'm not gonna bore you with any mumbo jumbo here and we'll just get straight into it, as there's at the very least 2-3 more episodes to go after this one, for this year alone. Fist 2 The Legend Continues is like a child between Way of the Exploding Fist and Target Renegade, but a child that did not take what's best from its parents, but what's forgettable, and ended up being less interesting than either of them. So it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up in the vein of Target Renegade, but taking place on a single plane only, with no vertical movement and a lot of annoying backtracking. And Way of the Exploding Fist's combat, just not as fun. When put together it's a decent game, especially in the quote-unquote parents wouldn't exist, but since they do, and you've played them, you expect so much more from the child and it just keeps failing to deliver. Fist 2 is not a bad game, let me make that clear. It's just a victim of having to follow the Way of the Exploding Fist, one of the best games on the system, which is also something that both Cannon Fodder 2 and Chaos Engine 2 on Amiga had to face, both being pretty good games unable to surpass cult classic that the predecessors were. If the footage in the background looks like fun to you though, you'll most likely enjoy the game, so just maybe base your opinion about it on that. Flash Gordon is an arcade video game based on a comic strip of the same name, and I gotta be honest with you guys, while I loved the movie, somehow I missed the game completely, and everything I'll say here is from what I learned online. So it is composed out of 3 individual and completely unique levels. First, set in maze-like jungle of Arboreum, from which Flash Gordon seeks for a way to escape. Second is side view fighting stage, where Flash faces Prince Barin. And the final level is a 3D style shooter viewed from the first person perspective, where Flash on a flying cycle is in pursuit of Ming the Merciless, the villain of the movie. Looking at it today, given when it came out, both graphic and sounds, especially Rob Hubbard's music, along with 3 different game modes, presented itself as a pretty decent value for the money, and may have been one of the better movie tie-ins for the time. Footballer of the Year is a very unique take on football management games. Instead of controlling a whole team, you're managing a singular striker throughout his career. You start in Division 4 with an ultimate goal of becoming the titular Footballer of the Year. At the beginning you have very little money, which is crucial as it's used to buy goal cards, up to 3 of which could be used during matches to create goal opportunities. So, if by any chance all 3 would work, a hat-trick is possible. All the actions during the game that you take part in are viewed from the first-person perspective, and they can be either attack on the goal or penalties. If you fail at shooting plenty enough times, you may lose your spot in the team. If you score often, you may end up being rewarded with a transfer to a higher league. Make no mistake though, Footballer of the Year is neither a great playing nor good looking game, but it's very unusual in its theme, and for this reason alone, it secures its spot on this list. Friday the 13th is a horror/action-adventure game based on a movie of the same title. 10 of your friends are lost in the surroundings of Crystal Lake Holiday Camp not far from Jason's grotto, and it's up to you to find and kill Jason before he kills you or your friends. The action takes place in the camp and you can freely walk around it, entering buildings that are there. Jason and other characters do the same. It's worth pointing out that he will often disguise himself as one of your teenage friends. To find him, you can hit your friends once to see if it's them or to uncover Jason. There are a lot of objects around the camp that can be picked up and used as weapons, things like pitchfork, machete or a chainsaw. The game is composed out of 5 levels, and in each you assume control of another of the teenagers. Depending on how many of your friends survive when Jason is killed, bonus points are added and then the game starts again with another character. Gauntlet is a top-down fantasy-themed maze shooter and a port of the same title game from the arcades. Unlike the original though, only 2 people can play the game on C64, which you know is less than 4 but still fun, especially that there's 512 dungeons to beat. There's no real aim to Gauntlet other than having to survive as long as possible and accumulate the most points, which kinda fits as the time that you have left is also your health meter. There are 4 characters to choose from, which also represent 4 different fantasy classes/races. So there's Thor the warrior, Questor the elf, and he's the race representative, because however you wanna look at it, elf is not a class. Then there's Tyra the Valkyria and Merlin the wizard. Warrior is strong but slow, Valkyria is middle ground between all other classes, elf is weak and fast, and wizard is fast with strong magic, but he's very weak. Given his advanced age, however, it's not a surprise really. Gauntlet is one of those titles that's entertaining because it was designed to be fast and frantic, and it delivers most of its fun from pure action rather than objectives or goals that most other games tend to have. It's a great game to fire up once in a while, cause it's never boring. Ghosts and Goblins is an arcade classic and a sideways scrolling action platformer, in which you play as Sir Arthur, who has to save his beloved from the clutches of an evil demon. Not that there are any other kinds of demons. Elite, the publisher, requested from the developer that the C64 version should not load any extra data from tape or disk drive and should fit entirely in memory. And while 64 kilobytes of RAM was nothing to scoff at on 8-bit systems, it was hardly enough to fit the whole game. So the decision was made that out of 7 levels present in the original, only first 4 would be available on C64, and last 2 would be swapped so that the game would not end on a bridge level. While disappointing because of the 3 levels being missing entirely, the remaining 4 are really well brought down to Commodore's Micro and very different from one another. Ghosts and Goblins features few different weapons and an armor that serves as an extra life falling off of your character when hit rather than having him die straight away. There are also same enemies and bosses as there were in arcade. It uses a 3-minute timer, or 2 minutes and 59 seconds to be precise, for each level, so while being devilishly difficult, it's also unforgiving in how long you can try to complete it. Ghosts and Goblins is a difficult but very fun game, and you will no doubt find yourself playing it more than once. Gradius, aka Nemesis, is a sci-fi horizontally scrolling shoot-em-up that is another game proving C64's prowess in arcade conversions. C64 Sport was made by Konami themselves, so the original developer of the game. You're flying from left to right, destroying any and all enemies in 8 different levels. The game features few upgrades, ranging from speed up through extra missiles, double grenades, laser cannon, multi-drones and shield. All of this can be picked up while playing, and other than double and laser, all can be mixed in any combination to better your ship. Graphically, the game does not stun, and while your ship and enemy sprites graphics are pretty nice, the backgrounds leave a bit to be desired and look empty and plain. Sound-wise, personally I have no complaints other than a small bug in the second level, which is more of a nuisance rather than the issue. Even if a bit repeatable because of the constant enemy movement patterns, Gradius is really fun, and all fans of arcade shooters will no doubt find themselves playing it time after time. So, if you're one of these, the game is a must-have. 10th Frame is a 10-pin bowling simulation for up to 8 players and easily my most favorite bowling game until Kingpin Bowling that released years later on Amiga and PC. The game is viewed from behind the bowler's back perspective and current player's scoreboard is displayed on the top of the screen. Before starting up the run, you can set up your bowler's position and target marker 2. When that's all done, you hold that fire button, which will fill up the power meter, and the longer it is held, the faster the ball will be thrown. When the meter goes down after power is set, its stop position will determine the strength of the hook. While 10 frame is fine alone, it gets most fun with others. Additional and rarely used feature that's a cherry on pie of this already sweet game is a function allowing to printing out scores for all players after the match ended. Unlike its arcade counterpart, 1942 on C64 is single player only and it's obviously a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up. You're a pilot of jet fighter during World War II and you're tasked with destroying any and all enemy's airborne forces. If you miss any of the planes, they will come back with another wave or loop back at the bottom of the screen to come back from the top again. While the gameplay is pretty solid, it's not flawless, the graphics are quite simple and at times, especially when looking at the landscapes, may even feel uninspired. Additionally, the collision detection leaves a bit to be desired. In other words, it's not unusual for your shots to just go through enemy plane swings without hitting it. Such. Other than the shots, you have a loop that you can use 3 times per life to save yourself from ongoing enemy fire. So yeah, 1942 is solid but not as good as it could have been, and it feels like a lot of shots have been taken with this one and most missed the mark. It was an easy port to make given the limited as compared to other shmups content, but someone dropped the ball and no one cared to give the game any more polish. Green Beret, aka Russian Attack, is based on an arcade game and it's a side-scrolling action adventure. So, you're walking from... no, correction. You're running like crazy from left to right wielding just a knife. In reality, that's how we get psychopathic mass murderers, in games it's how we get a hero. Your goal is to free POWs in 4 levels that the game is composed of, all representing different locales. So, missile, harbor, bridge and prison camp. The enemies come constantly at you from both left and right and you have to dispose of them fast, because if any of them does as little as touch you, you die. Since they never stop showing up angry and blood-hungry though, you should aim to run as fast as possible not to get overwhelmed. You get an extra life every 25,000 points and believe me, in Green Beret that's not nearly often enough. Gunship is a combat helicopter simulation tackling one of the most prominent attack helicopters of the 20th century, the AH-64A Apache. The simulation depicts weapon and flight systems and performance as realistically as it's possible on C64. The assortment of weapons to pick, while not massive, is quite varied and features a 30mm cannon, laser-guided Hellfire missiles, cluster of bombardment rockets and air-to-air missiles. The game features training and 4 different increasingly more difficult combat scenarios taking place in respectively Vietnam, Nicaragua, Middle East and Europe. While I was never very proficient at flight combat simulations, I can definitely appreciate one for what it is, and Gunship is ace. Hacker 2 The Doomsday Papers is direct successor to earlier Hacker, and picks up the story directly after the first game, assuming that you succeeded in it. Once again you're tasked with controlling a robot to infiltrate a secure facility in order to retrieve so-called Doomsday Papers from a well-guarded vault. It is crucial, however, that you succeed to ensure the security of United States. But there's a twist, which I'm not gonna spoil here cause it's a good one. Anyway, you're controlling the game using the 4 monitor system, one of which displays the minimap. You must avoid the guards at all costs too, as they will chase you and when they manage to get your robot, it will be crushed. There are a few robots that you can take control of, but they're not limitless, so keep that in mind. Hacker 2, same as the first one, is an unusual game and one deserving a longer review and not just few sentences, as it's impossible to describe it in detail in such a short time. Highway Encounter is an action strategy game viewed from an isometric perspective in which you must safely and successfully deliver a bomb along the stretch of a highway into an alien base at the end of it. Sounds ridiculous? It kinda is if you think about it, but if you don't, then it's pretty fun. The game consists of 30 screens and you play as a robot eerily similar to Daleks from Doctor Who, and have to clear the path for the bomb that is constantly pushed by other robots like yourself. They happen to also be your extra lives, so there's that. When all extra spare lives are lost, you have to push the bomb yourself. Highway Encounter is a very interesting title design-wise, and I remember that I had a lot of fun playing it, mainly because of how unique it felt, unlike anything else. But it's also another one of those titles that are victims to lazy converting and looks as if nothing was changed when it moved to C64 from ZX Spectrum, which is a shame because it could have at the very least look and sound a lot better. Hopeless is a state of mind I experience every morning when I wake up and have to go to work. I honestly am ready to win a lottery and become a traveling multimillionaire, spending a month here, a month there, experiencing everything the world has to offer. Not worrying about the next bill or what may happen a day or two from today. Oh well, it doesn't look like it's gonna happen anytime soon. Anyway, Hopeless is also an action-adventure game for Commodore 64 in which you play as an astronaut who has to save his fiancée, Jane, from clutches of the most wanted person in the galaxy, the so-called Manic Monk. So you'll travel through many strangely shaped space bases suspended in the void and patrolled by monstrous extraterrestrial creatures. You traverse the game world by walking or via jetpack, the latter using fuel so should not be overused. And you have a laser shield, karate chop and defense shield to protect yourself against enemies. Odd mixture of skills and gear really. While you move between those structures, you need to sabotage 15 hearts that correspond to Manic Monk's defense system, deactivating gates leading to his lair. Once they're all open, you can face the villain and save your love. Hypa-Ball is a futuristic sci-fi sports game for 1 or 2 players. You can play as either Hawks or Vipers and assemble your 3-man team out of available 10 players, each with their own unique stats of strength, agility and speed. The basket, which serves as a sort of 2-sided goal, moves up and down in the middle of the screen on a pole, and both teams have to catch a ball, pass it between their players and shoot it into said basket. 2 of the players on your team are in the air at 2 different altitudes and 1 always stays on the ground to collect the balls that fall down. You're controlling the player that's closest to the ball in the air and simultaneously the one on the ground too. Each player can hold the ball for up to 2.5 seconds only, so the game between seasoned players can be really fast and frantic, not to mention fun. Infiltrator is an unusual game. It's a flight combat simulator mixed with an action-adventure. You take a role of a James Bond-type agent whose objective is to fly a combat helicopter to enemy bases and then infiltrate their compounds, all to stop their mad leader. The game is divided into 3 missions, each of them split into 2 sections. First, in a helicopter where you fly towards enemy installation, fighting off enemy forces if necessary. And believe me, it will be. And second, on foot inside enemy bases where you have to locate and retrieve security card hidden in a cabinet somewhere. Once found, the card opens the door to the objective of each mission. And these objectives are very varied, from neutralizing dangerous gas to rescuing captive scientists and everything in between. Return flight is always shorter and less dangerous with far fewer enemies present. I'm not sure that I've given justice to Infiltrator in these few short sentences, but it was one of the most unique titles mixing genres quite successfully. And most importantly, doing it while still being pretty fun. International Karate is easily second best versus fighting game on C64, only bested by its own successor, International Karate Plus. Come to think of it, I think it's pronounced karate. Never mind. It simulates karate competition in which 2 fighters face each other in a bout for points. Each fight lasts 30 seconds and players get either a full or a half point for successful hits. When the time runs out, fighter with the most points wins. If there's a draw, little wrinkled old dude on the side says so. He's there to point out the obvious, but every sport competition needs one. It's a requirement. There's just no such thing as too many old wrinkled dudes, and every game should have at the very least one too. If you lose, the tournament is over and you get your score along with the belt color that you have reached. In 2-player mode, a fight lasts 60 seconds and there are 12 points players can compete for. A successful hit always rewards one, and being hit subtracts one from your count. When time runs out, or one of the players loses all points, it's the end of the fight and the whole match consists of 2 rounds. Graphics-wise, International Karate is just beautiful, featuring lush backgrounds of iconic locations around the world and beautifully animated fighters on the foreground with a dried-up grey racing standing shakingly in the background. It's a looker. Sounds are appropriately good too. Sure, there's no explosive special moves and no difference other than the kimono color between the fighters, but International Karate is a proof that Commodore could, if only devs would give it a bit more attention. I mean, comparing this and Street Fighter 2 ports to the system is unfair. This looks amazing and Street Fighter 2 is more akin to a dog's poo with a grass straw sticking out of it. Sure, it's bigger content-wise, so someone could say that some omissions to the original content/quality had to be made, but C64 had a disk drive, so there's no excuse for it really. Anyway, IK along with IK Plus are the most technical versus fighters on the system and permanent spots in each of C64's owners' collections. Or at the very least they should be. Jack the Nipper is an action-adventure game where you play as an infant prankster. And your aim is pretty simple, while also being quite unusual. You have to become the most naughty baby out there, all without getting caught and spanked. To the point that there's a naughty-o-meter at the bottom of the screen tracking your various shenanigans. If you get spanked 5 times, it's game over. On your mischievous adventures, you're going to visit many locations around the town, from kindergarten through police station and side streets to the museum. To cause mayhem, you'll jump on things, pick up objects and drop them where they cause most trouble, and in general will cause chaos everywhere. You are an infant force of distraction after all, and you will raise hell wherever you'll go. Jack the Nipper is one of the most unique games of the year, as it's not clearly representative of any particular genre, but a fun romp on its own, the way it is. Wikipedia page for Knight's Games is entirely empty. Now, that's a waste, cause despite not being the best game out there, it definitely deserves much more than just a short note on who and when made it. I'm not sure I'm the one to fill it in, but I can at the very least shed more light on it here. In essence, it's a tournament between the 2 knights for points, thematically different but mechanically very similar to Epic's multi-discipline sport simulations, like Winter or Summer Games. With a caveat that they take place in medieval times and many events are combat-based in one way or another. So, before each you get to choose the difficulty level and there's 8 disciplines to compete in. They are crossbow, archery, quarterstaff, ball and chain, which you may know under a different name and may live with you. In fact, she/he may sit next to you for all I know right now. Anyway, there is also pike staff, axemen and 2 types of sword fighting. Night Games is a fun and unique take on multi-event sports games, and if you enjoy this, you'll love this game too. Koronis Rift was built upon the fractal environment technology LucasArts created for the area title we've covered few videos ago, Rescue on Fractalus. Other than that, it's an entirely different game. You control a rover with which you enter rifts on mysterious planet Koronis. Those rifts are protected by various in color and design alien saucers, and depending on their color, your weapons and shield may work better or worse on them. And part of the fun is figuring out which shield and weapon modules work best where. You can send out a drone to recover found modules that can be later equipped on your rover, analyzed in your ship or sold. Up to 6 of these modules can be installed at one time, and you can turn them on and off as you see fit to mix and match for the situation that you're facing at any given moment. The ultimate aim of the game is to locate and destroy Saucer Control Base Hulk, which is located in the 20th Rift. So yeah, that spoiled the game for you a little. Sorry. I don't feel like I gave the game the justice it deserved, but it was a pretty impressive title for the time it released in, and it's perhaps for the best I was so vague, as it's worth experiencing by yourself at least once. Labyrinth is a very important game. I'd risk saying that in a way it may be nearly as important as Maniac Mansion. Why, you may wonder? Well, it's LucasArts' first real adventure game and one that designs influenced years later aforementioned Maniac Mansion. It is loosely based on a movie of the same name, and as you travel the titular maze, solving puzzles and avoiding various dangers, you aim to locate and defeat the main antagonist, Jareth, all within the real-life 13 hours that the game gives you to do so. Yes, 13 hours of our real-life time. Labyrinth is unique because it serves as a mid-step between earlier command-line text parsers, which I despise with passion and hope will never resurface to see the sunlight ever again, and later LucasArts' modern point-and-click interface. It uses 2 scrolling wheels of words, from which they are chosen to form basic sentences. While not as straightforward as SCUM Engine's point-driven controls, it's much friendlier to use than having to type in all the commands. Interestingly enough, according to Wikipedia's records, the game was more popular in the US than the movie it was based on. Access Software's Leaderboard is the very first title in the long romance with golf simulations. In fact, out of 87 games that they released over the years, grand majority were golf simulations, and all were really good. Yep, not a single stinker. Sure, some were a bit mismatched, like Links on the Amiga that required a beefy system to be playable, but if you had one, it was amazing. Anyway, coming back to Leaderboard, it's a golf simulation where up to 4 players can compete in a sport against each other in one of the 4 different water-based courses. Upon its release, the game was praised for both very detailed graphics and unparalleled realism of gameplay, especially when it came to putting. And no wonder, as it quickly jumped the charts, becoming the very best-selling C64 game for year 1986 in the UK. If you have any sympathy for the sport, you should definitely try Leaderboard, as it holds up even today, nearly 40 years later. Madness is pure madness! Well, not really. It's a single-screen platformer with an unforgiving time limit to complete each of the 32 stages. In theory, it's a simple start-to-exit fare, but the catch is that the exit needs to be activated by lighting all the torches scattered all around the levels filled with various bodies, some of which follow pre-assigned paths, while others may chase you throughout the entire stage. Each consecutive level is more difficult than the last, and soon enough you'll find yourself creating complex plans for the routes you'll need to take to complete a particular stage, lighting all the torches and avoiding all enemies, not to end up in the dead end. Madness is very simple in its design, but that's good because from the get-go you know what and how to do, and you just get served more and more demanding levels to beat. It's a natural and fun progression system that just works. And we're done with the second episode for 1986. What do you think? Did you learn of any games you might have missed in the past? Or do you have any fun or odd memories playing any of them back then? Make sure to let me know. I'm curious cause with each episode I learn of at least a title that I either never knew of or criminally overlooked a hidden gem that was staring at me right in the face countless times all those years ago. Anyway, make sure to come back next week for the next episode and subscribe if you don't want to miss it. If you like the video, you know what to do. If you don't, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments below. And if you feel like supporting this channel grow, Patreon and YouTube memberships are great and will help me eventually replace my editing PC. If you can't or don't want to do that, likes and subscribes are cool too. Most of all, however, I would like to take a second here and thank all the YouTube Let's Play and playthrough creators, from whose videos short bits were taken for this one as a video background to my commentary. You will find all their names linking to their channels in the description below. They're amazing, and thanks to their efforts, retro community can prevail for years longer and in better form than it could have otherwise. So thank you. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.